Welcome. My name's Lou Lucky. I'm a Live2D rigger, Live2D PSD cutter, all the above. I have a lot of experience in these kinds of things, and today we're going to be talking about something that's very near and dear to my heart, maybe somewhat strangely, is PSD formatting. VTuber model. VTuber models are given to you, are distributed as PSDs, which is a Photoshop document format. These PSDs have the model art in them, and this tutorial is going to be kind of a high-level tutorial. Going to be talking about how layer naming and formatting should work. Yeah, if you're not already, this is not going to be about cutting it up. This is not going to be about how to do the individual pieces and stuff. That's not what this is about. This is just about formatting it. So I'm assuming you're starting with a model that's already cut up, that's beautiful. By the way, this model is cut up literally perfectly. I didn't have to touch a thing about it. This is by an incredible artist named Kuini, linked in, sorry, the music didn't, here we go, shuffle play. Kuini, linked in the description of this video, Duck Master on Twitter. And this is going to be my new model. If you haven't seen this already, it's absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so anyways, I've sort of touched on this in a previous video that I did, although that one talked a lot more about layer cutting. And so if you want to see that video, that'll be in a little card on the top of the screen, I think. If not, in the description. And so here I specifically want to talk about layer naming. And you might ask, why does it matter what I name the layers if it makes sense to me and it makes sense to the rigger? Well, we're going to go through that right now. So this is a more new function of VTubing software. So, you know, maybe a lot of, it's not like in the basics, it's not like what you'll see in a lot of tutorials, is in VTube Studio, you can actually specifically set settings for individual pieces of the model. If the pieces of the model are not named correctly, if the names are not formatted correctly, this is what's going to happen. You're going to open up the model in VTube Studio hoping to customize it, because you can like recolor pieces, you can do special things where you make sure it doesn't like let's say I want to put like paste an item to my forehead. I wouldn't be able to do that unless I specifically excluded the bangs art mesh from item pinning, which is what this menu is about. But if I can't find what the bangs mesh is, the bangs art mesh is, that's going to be a lot harder. So VTube Studio does have this function that you see here where you can sort of click and it will show you everything that's underneath. But like if the art mesh is invisible or too small, like there's it's just untenable. So this model is great, by the way. I just noticed it just happens to be the only model in my library that has this thing about it where it doesn't have any art meshes named. So how do we prevent that from happening? I can tell you with confidence, absolute certainty, that the person who drew the model, who's also the rigger, did a great job. They didn't name the pieces art mesh 1, 2, 3, 4 to 100. They didn't name them like that. The reason that happened is because they named it, they gave the layer in Photoshop a name that did not fit Live2D's formatting rules. And when the layer name doesn't fit Live2D's formatting rules, it just automatically names the meshes art mesh 0 through whatever. Okay, so that's why this is important. It's for like way down the road for your client, and I mean it will also help the rigger when they're working. It's a lot easier to just know, just by looking at the name of a layer, exactly everything about it, rather than having to sort of figure out, okay, well, what folder, this is just called front, what is it the front of? Is it the front of the head? Is it front of the body? Like, what does front mean? So we're gonna be talking about layer naming. First things first, you cannot have names with spaces in them. You can see here that this layer is called front space tool space bag. Live2D does not accept spaces in the name. If you have a space in the name, it will change the name to artmesh. So everything here that has a space in it is just called artmesh 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. It also doesn't accept dashes. So you have to change, instead of using anything like that, you have to use underscores or just nothing at all. But most people, most riggers prefer underscores. It's just a little easier to read. Most people, I'm a programmer, so I can read camel case just fine, but most people are used to having a space there with like an underscore or something. So that means that pretty much what you're going to be expecting is that you're going to be changing every single name in here to have an underscore instead of a space. The other thing that's pretty interesting is that you will also run into issues if multiple layers have the same name, but not just multiple layers. If a layer or group has the same name, the layer name will be like the artmesh name in Live2D, this thing. The artmesh ID, which is what's shown in VTube Studio, is this thing. That will actually add like a number to it. So for instance, I bet there's multiple ones called head. Okay, I was wrong. There's not multiple ones called head. Let's just say that I have this head folder here, and then I also have a piece of the head that's called head. When I import this, I just renamed this layer to be head. When I import this, because there's a group that's called head and a layer that's called head, the layer, which comes after head in the list, will actually be called head2 in the artmesh ID. Now that's not the biggest problem in the world, honestly. It's really not, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And so in order to avoid that from happening, what I do is I add underscore group to every single group. Okay? Or you can do underscore part. Because technically in Live2D, these are called parts. So you could do underscore group, underscore part. Those are both great. And, you know, the rigger, they might not know why you did that, or they might not know this particular intricacy because they just haven't realized it yet, or maybe they're not that worried about those kinds of things, but I worry about those kinds of things, and I like everything to be absolutely perfect. Maybe that's just a compulsory issue with me, but I'm just telling you, if you wanted to do this absolutely perfectly, I'm showing you the way to do it. Oop. And then we go in here and we take a look. So this artist put the left and right at the beginning. If you're not aware, every piece that has a completely separate left and right side should be not only separated, but that the side should be indicated in the name. So you'll see here it's R goggles nub, which is this little tiny nub here on the side of the goggles. So they put it at the very beginning, which is perfectly fine. I do know some riggers that prefer that. Personally, I don't, and I do think that it's more common that they prefer the left or right side to be at the end of the name. But I do see the logic in putting it at the beginning. My preference for this name would be actually capital G goggles underscore nub underscore R. And of course the R is the model's right side, not when you're looking at it. Because if you were looking at it, it would be this one, right? But it's the model's right side. So that's the right. This is the left. And that is just something that you're going to have to absolutely ingrain in yourself while you're doing this. It's just, you just have to rewire your brain. I'm sorry, this is just the way it works. So I actually go through the whole file before I ever import it into Live2D and go through every single layer and make sure it is named the same that I want. Now, I also don't mind it having completely lowercase. I'm honestly fine with that. But in the case of this, since I was going through most of the layers anyways, I was like, I'll just put them in capital and stuff anyways. So another really common issue I always see is that, here, a perfect example. This eyelash is not labeled with a left and right. This is a super, super common thing that happens, is that the artist, just forgets to, or doesn't intend to label every single piece to the left and right. But the fact of the matter is that there's a whole nother eye on this side. So I need to know when I'm working with an eye, am I working on the left eye or the right eye? So every single layer has to have that little right or left. And even I go to the lengths that I even name the group layers with a left or right. So this is the left side, again, group. So I know this is the left side, okay? Again, if you don't do that, the Live2D art mesh ID will just have like a 2 on it, and you won't know is this left or right. Obviously, the rigger can see by the name of the, like the name that you type as the layer name will be here. It will be name, but in VTube Studio, the ID is what you can see. So we're just trying to format this all so that by the time it gets to VTube Studio, everything still looks gorgeous. Let's talk about the naming convention in general, okay? So let's go to the body. That's going to be the most complicated part. Let's talk about the skirt. So this is definitely a piece that has a lot of parts to it. You can see here that there's the main skirt that they've outlined and the back of the skirt, left and right. So things to note here. What is included in the name? The name it includes what this piece is, which is the skirt, where this piece is. It's the back of the skirt. Which side is this piece on? It's left or right. So just by the name, I know everything that's going on with this. Shadows, you tend to, at least usually what happens, and this is what I prefer as well, is that whatever is the shadow is the name of the piece that is the shadow of plus underscore shadow. So I know that main skirt underscore shadow is the shadow of the main skirt. Pretty self-explanatory, but you know, I just want to cover all my bases here. If we go to apron, for instance, we've got the main apron, outer apron, apron shadow, inner apron, back apron. So what are these pieces? This is the back part of the apron. This is the under, like black side of the apron. And we've got the shadow, that is the shadow falling from the white side of the apron onto the black side of the apron, which is the outer apron here. I'm assuming art mesh layer cannot be renamed in VTube Studio. No, art mesh layers cannot be renamed in VTube Studio, but they can be renamed in Live2D. It's just really annoying to rename stuff in Live2D. When I want to rename something in Live2D, let's say I wanted to change it from paper. Let's say I wanted to change it to paper-ish, okay? Personally, my preference is, and this is again a compulsory thing, I want the ID to be the same as the name. So not only do I have to change the name, I have to change the name to paper-ish. I have to type it, and then I have to click enter. Live2D is very annoying in that their UI is a little screwed up, and you have to click enter in order for it to actually stick. And then I go to paper, I have to retype it into the ID, paper-ish, enter. So that is now, in my brain, like, it is at least twice the amount of work that if I were to just rename it in Photoshop in the first place. Now, some downsides to renaming it in the PSD. If your artist comes back and says, oh, sorry, I've made some changes, here they are. That is a real pain in the neck. I will say that. That is an issue that comes across very frequently. That I will have reformatted the whole PSD, and then the artist says, oh, sorry, I've made these changes. Here's the new PSD. I have no idea what those changes are because I can't just compare the two files. Now, one of the ways to fix that, one of the ways to try to help yourself when that situation happens is always keep a copy of the original PSD so that you can compare the two files against each other, the new version that they've handed you and the old version. And then you can manually, at least this is what I do, I can manually copy over the pieces that have changed from the version that they've sent to me over to my new version of the PSD. Here's the other way you can fix that. You can reformat the PSD, rename all the layers, etc., and then send that PSD back to the client or artist. So in case they need to make changes, they're changing it with the newest version. That's usually what I do. I try to just be careful about, I'm not super precious about, they already have the art. I've just reformatted it a little bit. So I usually just hand it back to the client or artist and say, here's the reformatted version. Especially if the client is the artist, I always do that because they're much more likely to have new revisions afterwards than if the client and the artist are two different people. So I'll just give them the PSD back. I'm like, here's the the reformatted version. If you're gonna make any changes, please change them in that version. And then I just be really careful that if they do send me a back version, I keep a version list. So I'm like, oh, version 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know the changes throughout, just to be careful about that. I remember, here's another thing that's really important to know about PSDs. If you haven't heard it before, Live2D only supports 3 different blend modes. You can't see it, but there's a list of blend modes right here. Live2D only supports normal, add, which is called in Photoshop it's called linear dodge add, kind of. It's actually slightly different, but and multiply. So if your layer is not one of those 3, it simply will not look the same. So yes, so that's one thing. And I will say, by the way, if you do use Photoshop, most people don't use Photoshop for this whole process. If you do use Photoshop and you are a rigger or an artist, I have a link in the description to my Ko-fi for free Photoshop scripts that will check all of your layers to see if any of them are not the right blend mode, and it will replace all of the spaces with underscores. So if that interests you, there's a free link in the Ko-fi, just letting you know. The other thing I wanted to mention, if your model has any kind of symmetry, you will do yourself a huge favor to move the model before you import it into Live2D, and to make sure that it's perfectly in the center of the canvas. So the way I do this is I create a temporary new layer. I create a line that's just 1 pixel tall. And then here on the side of Photoshop, you can actually specify exactly where to put it, and you can put it right in the middle of the canvas, which is 2500 in this case. Then actually Photoshop is really annoying about this. You have to manually go in and unhide every single layer. Don't know why they do that, but anyways. I then select everything and move it. So for instance, in this case, the model is actually asymmetrical except for the head, but the head is symmetrical. So I have to go in and move the whole model over so that it's perfectly in the center of the canvas. This is because Live2D, frankly, just does not handle symmetry as well as I would like, personally. There's certain functions that it does that require the entire canvas to be perfectly symmetrical. So as a how to say, safety for myself and to make my process as quick as physically possible, I just symmetrize it in the original art file. Some of these functions that Live2D doesn't handle very well are when you're drawing the art mesh. Let's say I finished this art mesh. It looks gorgeous. Let's just say that happened. I can click Control Copy, go over to this other one, click Edit Art Mesh, delete this one, paste this one in, and then right click and say Reflect Horizontally. If the model's not horizontal, it won't work. I think maybe you can change it. No. Yeah, no, that doesn't work. So, yeah, very frustrating. So this is why I always, there's a few things that are like this. Like there's also a reflect motion setting that you can do for parameters, which only sometimes allows you to change the axis of symmetry. Kind of strange, very annoying. So long story short, in order to fix all of those problems, I just try to make the face symmetrical. If you have to choose between the body and the face, like let's say the face is like on a different axis of symmetry than the body is, if the body was symmetrical in this case, I would choose the face because the face has a lot more pieces to it than the body does that will have to be flipped. For the body, usually the only things that will have to be symmetrized are like the arms and the legs, maybe the torso a little bit, but that's it. So if you have to choose between putting the body or the head in the absolute center of the canvas, choose the head every time. I think that's it. I think we've covered everything I wanted to talk about. Like I said, this is just, it's gonna take a while. It's gonna be very tedious in the beginning, but I promise you that over the long run of your rigging and exporting and everything, it's gonna save you so much time. I should note, by the way, that if you do what I do, which is, for instance, if the eyes are perfectly symmetrical, which I believe in this case they are, what I do is I rig one eye, and then I just copy it and reflect it on the canvas. If that happens, obviously Live2D is just going to change the name to be like right eye R2, right? It's going to change all the names to be that. I do try to go through the names and remove the 2 and add L. I rename every single layer because, again, once you go to Photoshop, that 2 will be there. The client will be able to see that too. They'll see, you know, like eye right 2, and you're like, what's eye right 2? Oh, it's the left eye? Okay, that's weird. Most people will never see it, but I'll know. I'll know. I hope this was a good resource for you, and if you want to check out the Ko-fi for the more resources, or if you have a suggestion for another tutorial that you want me to do, please let me know in the comments. I'm super open. I kind of like doing these tutorials. I just like throwing knowledge at people who didn't ask. Yeah, I hope you have a great day and you learn something new. Goodbye.